Hello, everybody. I am Rebecca and I work closely with the course director, Shinari Aponzo, on the Fashion Business Management MA at IIT, based in Colombo. My intention for IIT is to add value to the course and student enrichment by reaching out, connecting with my contacts in the fashion industry and adding valuable knowledge to the course and overall programme. I'm currently in London and our special guest, David Tring, is in Hong Kong. David and I are both from Nottingham, the home of Robin Hood and Nottingham Forest. David and I met 20 years ago when I reached out to him during my postgraduate study because of his expertise in denim. At this point, the UK head office was based in Nottingham. My research in denim took me to Antwerp, which was the head office of Lee and Wrangler in Europe. David was the vice president of Lee Jeans Asia Pacific and took the brand to #1 in the marketplace. He now creates masterclasses in denim, so we're very lucky to have this masterclass with David today. David has worked in fashion since he was a teenager, and his career began in Nottingham on the shop floor of H&M or C&A. David?
I was actually in an army surplus store right at the beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Thank you so much for coming today, David. And we're really looking forward to hearing about your expertise and career in denim.
Thanks, Rebecca. And just really nice to see you again, because 3 years now with COVID. I think the last time I saw you, we were in London together and you were giving me a little bit of advice on what I should do next in my career. So I really appreciate that. And I just love this opportunity really to talk with all these students and potential future leaders for the denim industry and the fashion industry, hopefully. So yeah, really looking forward to today, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so let's get into our presentation today. And this masterclass, it is focused around denim, and I've entitled it, Does Denim Have a Future? But what we're really dealing with is the sustainability challenges for denim and the wider fashion industry. And this is really something all of you will be needing to deal with within your careers. It's probably the biggest challenge to all industries, not just denim and fashion. And my experience really is mainly around denim. So this is a topic that I can talk in depth on. And particularly sustainability is something that's very close to my heart and something I'm very passionate about. So let's get going. And that's what we're going to cover over the next 30 or 40 minutes. A little bit of background before we get going. As Rebecca was mentioning earlier, I was a buyer at H&M for around 10 years and was very lucky to be working and living in Sweden, in Stockholm, in the head office. I started in the store and they gave me a lot of opportunities to progress. And I was working with the founder of H&M, Erling Pearson, a really great man. I got a lot of good knowledge there and education because I had really good mentors that taught me the industry and would travel with me to Asia, and we'd go into button factories and zip factories and denim laundries, and they would teach me the business. So I feel very privileged to have people guiding me. And that's part of why I am very interested in working with students and mentoring young people along the way. I also got my passion for denim really ignited when I was at H&M as well. We would tour around the world, particularly America, looking for vintage secondhand denim to replicate and get inspiration from. And when I left H&M, I really wanted to work for a denim brand. So I joined the VF Corporation, the world's biggest company for owning brands. You know, VF own North Face, Vans, Timberland, Kipling, and at the time it was Wrangler and Lee Jeans. And I was the product director in Europe for Wrangler. And I got to work with a great friend of mine, as you can see in this image, Watanabe-san. And I guess I first got noticed and became a little bit known in the denim industry for the collections I did in Europe particularly one called Bluebell, which was all about heritage denim and reinventing the original 4 products from the Wrangler archive. So that was a really fun and interesting project. I moved with VF to Hong Kong in 2006, and I was working for the Lee brand, and I stayed working with the Lee brand up until the end of last year. And we developed Lee into be the #1 brand in the Chinese market, 800 stores, and the highest prices globally for the Lee brand. A pair of jeans in China from Lee was a premium product, and it would cost you 5 times the price of what you would be paying in America, where it's a different positioning. To enable that, we had our own design and marketing team and merchandising teams in Hong Kong, designing all of our product and communication for China and for the Asia market. And I had a team of about 40 designers in Hong Kong, still there today, doing very well. Very proud of that team. And together we won quite a few prizes, and we also were holders of quite a few patents for design, and particularly design patents for designing for the female body type in a project we call Body Optics. So yeah, that's just a little history of me in my career and product. It's like 40 years into 4 slides, so, but keeping it brief. A little bit about me as a person. So there's 3 or 4 things I think that have really influenced my career, obviously, or the person I've become. Part of it, of course, was the people I worked with in my career, and I think that's where the luck comes, is the people that you get to work with. I'm dyslexic, and today I really see that as a superpower, because dyslexics really see the world differently. We have our own challenges to deal with, particularly in spelling and reading, but we're also really good at finding paths around problems and finding out-of-the-box solutions. And it's surprising how many creative people and fashion people are having some form of dyslexia. And today, as we try to build diverse teams, I think having somebody with dyslexia in your team is actually a huge advantage. It wasn't seen like that when I was at school. I was actually in the bottom class in the bottom school in Nottingham, and yeah, it wasn't a good experience at all. So, but today, yeah, I really see this as an advantage, and I think a lot of other people do when they see how I work and how I work within my teams. Another big influence is skateboarding, as Rebecca mentioned. I've been skateboarding since 1975, I think. We didn't really write down or make a little video when we started in the 70s, but yeah, it was pretty early on. I got pretty good at that. Yeah, I think skateboarding teaches you a lot. It teaches you to be creative. It teaches you about self-expression. And anytime you get good at something, you know, you've got to work really, really hard. There's no luck involved in getting good. And I think one of the things that is shared in how we design products in the fashion business is, you know, for a skateboarder to learn something new, it takes a lot of practice. And the best skateboarders in the world are not the ones that don't fall off. They do fall off repeatedly, but they get up and they keep trying. And then once they master that trick that they were trying to learn, they tweak it and create it into something new. And I think the designing of product and the development of ideas is something very similar. You know, it's we need to fail to be able to build and to get better. If you never fail, you're probably not pushing hard enough. So learning to accept that and thrive on it, I think, is something important in a career. I certainly think creativity can be found anywhere, and inspiration can be found anywhere. This is a photo of me with a repair lady in Beijing, in the Hutongs, just very close to Tiananmen Square. And she actually repairs everything that you take to her. She's got a whole industry going there. And I had a bag that needed some repair on the strap, so she was doing that for me. And in my broken Mandarin, we had a really nice conversation. I take a camera with me everywhere because we are a very visual industry, fashion. And there's so much information out there from blogs and magazines and all the other different things that you can get hold of. But I do find if I'm taking my own photos and getting that inspiration myself, you kind of see things that other people don't see, and it makes it more personal. So my trend boards would be a mix of information from all over the place, but it always includes a few of my own images as well that have inspired me as I look for building a collection or building a story or an idea. But, you know, my career didn't really start at H&M. Actually, it started, as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning in a army surplus store selling old army clothing, Dr. Martin boots, Wrangler jeans, Lee jeans, Falmer jeans, and even Levi. And, you know, I thought I was 15. I was still at school, but I was working in there on Saturdays. And I kind of found my calling very early on. I really enjoyed working in the shop, working in retail, talking with people and selling product and doing all the visual merchandising in the windows. And I think by 1978, 79, I was 18, 19 years old, and I was already manager of the store. So it just really clicked for me working in the store. So I've worked all over the industry, really, when you think about it, coming from these small corner shops all the way through to a VP of an American corporation. So for me, when I talk about the denim industry, it really includes everyone. You know, it's from the shop floor to the factory floor to the mills and all these amazing people that are involved at every stage. It's not just about the designers or the people working in the brand. It really is about everybody. And I think that's been an advantage for me, the ability to talk to people at all different levels within a business, you know, whether it's the people working in the stores who really are my heroes, because they're the front of the brand. They're the ones that have the interaction with the consumers, or you're talking with the presidents of brand and the board of directors. Everybody's important. But it's important not to forget the people that are really doing the work on the front line. So I always try to remember that. So we're talking about denim, and does denim have a future? Because the sustainability challenges that we're all facing now are incredible, and it's absolutely going to be the biggest challenge you will face in your career. And it's very different from any generation that's gone before, because the previous generations are the ones that have created the problem. And unfortunately, your generation are the one that's going to have to find the solutions if we don't do really serious damage to the planet. So I'm an optimist. I think there's all sorts of ways we can make a difference and things that can guide you in dealing with sustainability. So let's get into this a little bit. And sustainability is really personal to me. It always has been. You know, when I was a buyer in '87, I wrote this report called The Green Planet, and I presented that to the buying director at H&M, thinking, yeah, we're going to do something good and we're going to do it quick. And he just threw me out the office and said, hey, come on, David, this is just politics. You know, he loved me like a father, but he didn't like this report, that's for sure. And looking back, I didn't do a really good job. You know, I misread the audience. I just thought everybody would care about the planet and think that this was a good thing to do. And I hadn't really thought through my presentation. I didn't have a strong story to tell, because I just thought it was going to be a yes and it was going to be a win. So it didn't go ahead. It took me a couple more years, and then a group of us in '92 did manage to launch H&M's first sustainability collection, and that was called Eco Cotton. And we even got to be buying organic cotton yarn or cotton fiber from the fields in Turkey. And that was one of the big challenges at the beginning. How do we calculate the amount of fabric or the amount of fiber we're going to need from a field? How many t-shirts will that make? How many trousers will that make? So there was a lot we had to learn as we entered into that project. But sometimes you just have to jump in and you have to start learning and you have to start developing ideas. And it was something I've always volunteered for all the projects that come up, because I always think they're a great learning experience. On the other side of the screen right now, this is my niece. This is Samantha. And Samantha she was a designer, fashion designer, but she changed her career aspirations after traveling the world and wanted to do things around sustainability, and took a BA in sustainable design, and now is the key strategist for the Extinction Rebellion organization in London, and organizes a lot of the different protests and things that they're doing there to try to push governments and companies to be more sustainable and to stop damaging the planet. Yeah, and I realized as I was putting the decks together, there's a 30-year gap between what I was looking at in 92 and what Samantha's still needing to do in 2022 as she's here at Fashion Week in London with her protest. And if I could go back in time and just talk to myself and say, hey, 30 years time, you're still going to be talking about this, and we haven't really gone that far, I just don't think I would believe me, because we should have come further. They say the best time to solve sustainability was 30 years ago, but the second best time is right now. So as an optimist, we need to continue. We need to be able to solve this, because Samantha will tell you that time is running out, and we need to fix so many different elements within industries, and not just fashion. It's all industries that need to be taking a lead now to get things done. So how do we do this? I believe there are 4 steps that we can take as individuals and as companies, organizations, and even governments to be dealing with sustainability. The first one is, of course, we have to get a real understanding of what the true situation is. There is a tremendous amount of misinformation, greenwashing, and downright lies out there as well as a lot of really good information. So how do you sort through that? We'll talk about that. Step 2 is, how do you measure your emissions? You'll hear a lot about carbon footprints in the future if you haven't already. And this is really measuring how sustainable you are, how sustainable your business is, what kind of emissions are you creating, and a way of measuring that. Because once you can measure something, you can manage it, and you can start setting goals to be able to correct it. So setting goals is the third part, really important, that we can, as companies and organizations, set science-based targets. And I'll talk about what those are and how we do that and how important they are. Because once we've got a goal and a target to achieve, we can then start looking at how to be the change that we want to see in the world, and working with these different strategies to reduce our emissions and reduce the carbon footprint. And again, talk a little bit more about that in the last part once we get there. So let's go deeper into the first one, all about understanding. So I guess the first thing we should say is, what is sustainability? It's one of the most overused words out there. I think it's, there are so many definitions of what sustainability is, and most of them are really not true. I go by this one. This is the general one that the sustainability community would use. And it was defined by the United Nations in 1987, who commissioned a report on environment and development called Our Common Future. And it was done by a group called the Brundtland Commission. And they defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So what does that really mean? Let's take it a little slower. Meeting the needs of the present. So that means making sure that we have enough power, energy, water, food, clothing, and all the other things that we desire. Some we need, some we desire, to be able to live the lives that we live. But the important part is this next part, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So if we really live in a world where we just take everything, and don't leave anything behind, then we're going to have a serious challenge for the future generations. So that's sustainability, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And this has been a definition since 1987. The United Nations is, I think, one of the most useful places to get information about sustainability. It's obviously supported by all major governments around the world, and a lot of the NGOs will work with the United Nations to help set goals, research, and understanding. And the United Nations have 17 sustainable development goals. All these have been agreed by all the major governments in the world at the Paris Accord last year, and talk about that in a second. And many companies are working towards this now, and all industries need to be focused about what we do. Those 17 goals are all important, but we all kind of navigate more and are drawn towards ones that where we feel we can make a difference. And in the denim industry and the fashion industry, I think the three I'm highlighting today, I think, are really important. Number 6 is all about clean water and sanitation. And for those of us that live in Asia and particularly Southeast Asia, we all see the challenges with water and having good sanitation, something that's just accepted in Western countries as you know, not a challenge. We clearly see that challenge in Asia. So this goal is all about ensuring the availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And the United Nations have 8 targets, 32 different publications that you can read to understand more and get that understanding. And they have already 862 actions happening around the world. And there's a lot of really good stuff going on around water. Number 9 is about industry innovation and infrastructure. It's about building a resilient infrastructure that promotes inclusive and sustainable industrialization and fosters innovation to help to be able to achieve that. We'll talk a little around this when I've got a section where we talk about what is a circular economy and how can we apply that into the denim and fashion business. And this one's really important, because if we continue to build our infrastructures the way we have in the past, we will run out of resources and we will have global warming on a much higher scale than it even is today. So for goal 9, there are 8 targets, 14 publications, and over 700 actions already in place. And then number 12 is about responsible consumption and production patterns. So something very much about the consumer, you know, how much they buy and what they do with that product at the end of life. And it's also about how we produce and where we produce and the impact that we can have with that. And there's 11 targets, 13 publications, and well over 1,100 actions. And these numbers are growing all the time. This was taken, I think this data is about 8 months old now. So 6, 9, and 12 are the 3 that I think are really super important. But, you know, you'd look at across these and you can see things like no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, gender equality. All of these are really important. I just think for the denim industry, there's 3 that we can be really focused on here and make a big change. One of the places I go to get information in the cotton and denim industry is called the Transformers Foundation. This is really set up. It's almost like Wikipedia for the denim industry. We have videos, there's documents that can be read, podcasts with some really interesting people that are experts in sustainability talking about our industry. A number of reports that can be read. You know, they're looking at how do we combat greenwashing and what is greenwashing, and just there's so much misinformation. It's important to know where the right information is, and I think Transformers is one of the best places to get that information. They introduced a report actually recently about cotton called The Case Study in Misinformation. And this one really shows warts and all what's happening with cotton. There are a lot of misleading data about water usage of cotton, and that all gets tidied up in this report. It still shows that there's a big problem. It's not trying to push things aside. It's just helping the industry have true facts to be able to work from so that we can lower our emissions and build a cleaner and better denim industry and cotton industry. I also really like motive.org. They're the people I've been doing masterclasses with for the textile industry. Motive do a lot of online training programs for retailers, buyers, manufacturers all over the world, a lot with North America, but also Asia has some as well. And one of the reports they do, some of this is free, some of this has to be paid for, but one of the reports they really do that I think makes a big difference is their preferred fiber and material market report. And here they have experts talking about the different fabrics that are available or yarns, and telling you what's beneficial and what's not when it comes to being talking about the sustainable aspects of that. So this year they were really talking about hemp. Hemp is a really interesting fiber. It grows with almost no water needed, just rain fed, no need to irrigate, and doesn't use any fertilizer or chemicals in its growing. It's a very robust plant and grows very quickly. And this is something in the denim industry we're starting to use to replace cotton. It's a very interesting development. So lots of different interesting things to be able to read within the Motive resources. And then the other area I want to talk about on information is there is a lot of legislation already in place, but there's a lot coming through. And I think it's very important for industries to stay ahead of legislation, because if you wait, you're going to be too late to be able to then adjust. So for all businesses, we have to keep a real eye on what's happening here. One of the challenges, I think, from the United Nations in 1987 was in that Brundtland report, they said when it came to sustainability, industry should be allowed to look after itself and regulate itself. And clearly that was probably not the right decision. We do, if it was, we wouldn't be having the problem today that we have today. We do need legislation to have that flat playing field, so everybody is dealing with the same levels, and we haven't got people that are polluting and then calling something sustainable when it's not. So I think this is really interesting. The Fashion Act, that is something that's happening in New York. So America generally, the government haven't been that active in passing sustainability and legislation to do with how the planet's warming. Certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been changing a little bit recently. But one of the interesting things in America is that the states themselves can actually pass legislation. So this is New York passing something called the Fashion Act, which will make every brand that wants to sell their product in New York be more transparent, more detailed with what's happened with their product, where it was made, and what the carbon footprint is of that product. And once that happens, that legislation, I'm pretty much convinced, will get copied around other cities around the world and some more of the enlightened governments that are interested in protecting their people and protecting their environment. So legislation is really important, and to be honest, we need more to guide us. So how do we measure our sustainability? How do we measure the type of emissions that we are creating? Because once you can measure things, you can manage it. And one of the things I really like is something called the Higg Index. This is something that can be applied to any industry. They have a way of measuring how much your energy use is, how much you're using water, how much of emissions that you're actually creating. And then you get a number at the end, and the lower the number, the better. This is how you create the carbon footprint. The Higgs index has come under criticism recently in Norway, who were prosecuting H&M for not using this information correctly. They were actually greenwashing by using this information to make it look like something was sustainable. So it needs to be understood how to use the Higgs index. But for industry to be able to measure and for us to set our own targets, I think it's a really good tool. Because like I was saying, if you can't manage what you don't measure. So within denim, one of the great things is we have something called LCAs, life cycle analysis. And that's something where you can measure a product right from the cradle, or which is the cradle that we would say in this case is the farm. And what are the emissions? What's the water use? What's the chemical and fertilizer use? All the way through the spinning of the yarn, the dyeing, the cutting, the sewing, the washing, and even transportation. And once you get it in the store. So every single product you can, with a life cycle assessment, you can really measure your emissions. And once you do that, you can find ways to then start to decrease it. And that's my quick version of it. What we're going to have now is a movie. It's a very short one. We have a few movies to look at today. And this is from Levi's. They did a life cycle assessment within their supply chain, but they actually found ways to improve their product with a demand coming from the designers. So let's have a look at some of the learnings from Levi and how they used their LCA.
So for Levi Strauss & Company, a turning point in our sustainability journey, in fact, just a huge inflection point, was 11 years ago when we conducted our first environmental life cycle assessment on our products. We did an environmental LCA on a pair of Levi's 501s and a pair of Dockers khakis. And an environmental life cycle assessment looks at the entire life cycle of the product, from growing the cotton, the raw material stage, through spinning that cotton into yarn, weaving that yarn into fabric, cutting and sewing it into a product, and then shipping it to a retail store, consumer use, and finally end of life. So it's that entire life cycle of the product that we look at, and scientists conduct the life cycle assessment and use a lot of data to determine how much water, energy, chemicals, environmental impact that we have in making the product. So what we found surprised us in two areas. One is just the amount of impact that we have in making our products. One pair of Levi's 501s uses almost 1,000 gallons of water in the entire life cycle. So that shook us up. It woke us up to the impacts that we were having. But the other thing that we learned is we had always assumed that our biggest impacts were in manufacturing. That's what we knew, that's what we were closest to. But what the life cycle assessment revealed to us is that our biggest impacts are actually in growing the cotton and consumer use, the two ends of the life cycle assessment. Growing cotton uses 2/3 of all of the water that a pair of Levi's requires. Consumers washing and drying our product during the time that they own it uses about 30% of the energy. So those insights really caused us to shift our focus on what we were doing. So I mentioned that one of our big material impacts is around water. And after we conducted our environmental life cycle assessment and shared those results with people in the company, the people who design our products came to us in the supply chain and said, we need to do something about the amount of water that we're using. Yes, we know that cotton and consumers, they're a big part of it, But the part that we control, what can we do about that? And so our design people came to us in the supply chain and they said, we want you to give us product that has the same look and feel, the same aesthetic, because that's so important to design. And they said, do the same aesthetic, but using less water. And so it forced us in the supply chain, people in product development and sourcing, to go back to our contract factories and work with them to figure out how could we reduce the amount of water. Were there different techniques that we use? There's usually a recipe, literally a recipe for, oh, we do this to the jean and then we wash it for 10 minutes in this amount of water and then we wash it again for 20 minutes in this amount of water. And can we adjust the recipe to use less water? And in fact, we found that we could. In the end, we came up with 21 techniques that helped us reduce the amount of water up to 96%. And in the 5 years that we have been implementing this water less program, the company has reduced our water use by over 2 billion liters of water.
So that's fantastic. 2 billion liters of water saved by tweaking the different parts of the recipe that Levi are using to create the products. And I saw very similar numbers when we did an LCA for Lee jeans back in 2012. So, there's some real learnings to be had with LCAs. Once you are able to do the LCA and once you're being able to measure your emissions, that then allows you to start, as we said, you can then start managing it, and we can start setting science-based targets to reach the overall goals that we're aiming for in reduction. So a science-based target is something that's agreed with an external company that is transparent and aligned with what's considered a science-based. Let me start again on that. They are considered science-based if they're in line with what the latest climate science deems necessary to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. We talked about the Paris Agreement earlier. And the Paris Agreement was about limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees above the pre-industrial levels, which is about 150 years, and pursuing efforts to limit warming to 1.5. So these numbers, 2 degrees and 1.5, are really important. And all the world's governments signed up eventually to the Paris Agreement and are now starting to implement strategies to be able to reduce their goals using these science-based targets. And it's important because if we really want to achieve this, it means all the greenhouse gas emissions must halve by 2030 and drop to net zero by 2050. And that is a huge ask, I think, because it involves everybody. It's not just companies. This is everybody needs to be working towards reducing their emissions. More so in Western countries than Asian and Eastern countries, I have to say. So the good news is, I think many of the bigger companies in the world, and particularly in the denim industry, people like Levi, Lee, Wrangler, they are now setting 1.5 rather than 2 degrees because they want to be ahead of this and they want to be able to get to the targets earlier rather than later. So we're seeing a lot of movement in setting these science-based targets. But of course, it's one thing for the CEO of a global company to say, we're going for 1.5. It'll be for the teams and everybody in the company to actually get there. So how do we do that? How do we be that change that the wonderful Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world? And I think that's very relevant about this because it is personal when we talk about sustainability. One of the areas I'm very passionate about in the industry that can really help move the dial for us is about the circular economy and how we can use our waste to create new things or become food for the next generation of products. And this is really pioneered by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And here's a short video created by Ellen MacArthur Foundation to explain what a circular economy is in context of denim and fashion.
The fashion industry follows a take, make, waste formula. Take from the earth, make a product, and waste it.
You can build things in a great way with a good cause and a good intention, but at the end of the day, if they just end up in a landfill, then there's a problem.
He's right. So how do we change the fashion industry?
We have to think differently, and the circular economy is the solution.
The circular what?
In a circular economy, from the start, you think about how can those materials not generate waste, but also you develop new business models so those products can be used for much longer.
Long story short, let's make stuff that never becomes waste and can be used again and again and again and again. Hence, the circle.
I think it's like super cool. I treat it like my baby.
For me, it's the most sexy product we have. It's a cool product.
Jeans are universal, making them the perfect guinea pig for a circular project.
So the jeans redesign started with a simple question. What would it take to make a pair of jeans circular now?
Good question. Currently, making jeans requires a lot of cotton, pesticides, fertilizers, and water. They're dyed with lots of chemicals and then washed with even more chemicals and stones to look old. So, where do we start?
The denim and the thread are biodegradable.
98% of the water is completely recycled.
We use a lot of old jeans to make new jeans.
We also took away the back patch and just have printed label.
You can unscrew the buttons for the recyclers.
We have laser technology to age a garment.
Choose to print all the information inside the jeans.
We cancel all the metal rivets, traditional in a pair of jeans. We don't compromise quality, we don't compromise design, we don't compromise image because it's circular. Sexiness is still there.
Circular jeans are no experiment. They're real and they're out there. In fact, over 60 companies are creating a circular collection, launching durable jeans that will become new jeans again in the future.
Can you believe this is made out of recycled denim?
I do think we can make fashion circular. I think it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of investment, and a lot of creativity, but it is possible.
If we can give not only the physical comfort of clothing, but also the mental comfort of knowing that you're wearing something that doesn't have the impact on the environment or the impact on people's lives. I mean, it's a better story, isn't it?
So that's a quick video about the circular economy. And, you know, if we don't have this, it means things that we throw away are just ending up in landfill and never biodegrading. This is a pair of Wrangler jeans that were found, you know, they're about 10 years old. But what's happened here is all the cotton and natural components have all biodegraded, because cotton biodegrades in about 8 to 9 months. And what's left is everything that's man-made on that pair of jeans. So the yarn that you see going across, right, this is not modern art, somebody once said to me. This is actually the weft yarn, the one that goes around to the side. That's a stretch. So stretch is man-made fiber, and it lasts, and it's not going to biodegrade for at least 200 years. And when things are in a landfill, they don't really biodegrade anyway. So everything that you throw away is going to be there for generations and generations of time. And what else can you see on this product? Well, you can see the metal buttons, the metal rivets, the zip, the polyester tape that attaches the zip to the jean, the poly thread that stitches all the pieces of fabric together. You can see the pocket bags, which are also made of polycotton, and even that yellow label in the middle of the screen, which has got some kind of plastic coating on it, which means, again, it's just not going to biodegrade. So I hate to see this, but imagine all of the sportswear industry, everything that you wear from Nike and Adidas and Lululemon, all those great jogging and jeggings that you wear, all of that, it's never going to biodegrade. And there is no way really of recycling a lot of this type of product today. So this is why we need circular economy. And it's also about choices that consumers can make. As we design, now at the design stage, probably we feel that maybe 80% of the emissions and the sustainability challenge we have can be solved at a design stage. Of course, some of it has cost implication, but it's things like, if we think about this at the beginning, reduce the rivets and put stronger stitching there. If we make sure the buttons are unscrewable, if we make sure our stitching thread is cotton, this is going to make a product that is recyclable, but is also biodegradable. So whatever happens to that product, then we're causing a lot less damage. And there is so much going on innovations now on recycling cotton to make new products with that. So I think this is really important steps that are starting to come about now. One of the areas that's a real problem, as I mentioned earlier, is the stretch fabrics, because that's all man-made. It's petroleum-based. It's just like plastic in a way. And there are very few replacement yarns in the stretch world. What we are finding at the moment is this one from a brand. This is a plant-based yarn called Corova, which is biodegradable and looks like a really great fabric to start off with. It was invented by Alberto Candiani, and he got his inspiration actually from the natural way that ham is, so the meat, the ham, is wrapped inside the Italian delis. And that's where he got his inspiration. And he found a way of using a natural rubber to replace those synthetic stretch yarns. And there are one or two other options when it comes to stretch yarns, but it's a fraction of the total stretch jeans or stretch products that are made today. So today, as a wrap up our masterclass where we're looking at sustainability, I've talked about the 4 steps that we can use to get better at this. One is to understand and go to the right place to get the information so that you really do understand the levels of emissions that are being created and what sustainability really means, and some of the ways of overcoming this and some of the actions that have been taken, particularly by the United Nations and NGOs. We talked about how to measure our carbon footprint, because if we can measure it, we can then start manage it, like companies setting science-based targets to be able to achieve the Paris Accord goals as defined by all world governments and the United Nations. And then we can start being part of that change and dealing with the day-to-day elements of design, manufacturing, consumption, and as consumers, how we deal with what we buy, the choices we make, because sustainability is a lot about choices. And how we dispose of garments. Are we just going to throw them in the landfill and leave them there for several generations? Or are we going to look at a circular economy and ways of recycling and reusing? So a lot of this is choices. When we talk about sustainability, it really is something that's emotional. It's emotional for me. You can see it's been something that's been throughout my career, something I've been working with. Not all the time, different times it's had a different focus. But I think in your career, it's a little bit like this, another great quote from Mahatma Gandhi: happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are all in harmony. I think that's another great way of thinking about sustainability and the efforts that we can do. I certainly found when my actions matched my values, that's when I was most comfortable in my career and in myself, in what I'm doing. And you can't have that all the time. It's impossible. We are humans. We do make mistakes. We do fall. But as I said, with skateboarding, we get up and we start developing and trying to be better. I hope today's been an interesting talk for you. I hope this stimulates some thoughts around sustainability and the roles that you'll be able to play in the future as you go into your careers. And if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer. And if I can't, I can find somebody that can, that's for sure, because I don't know everything. That's been proven many times. So feed your questions through your tutors and through Rebecca, and they'll come back to me and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today. I really hope one day that I can be in Sri Lanka and some of the other areas within Southeast Asia where this is going, and have a chance to talk to you personally. Thank you so much for this.